Hi, everybody. Welcome to a new week, new edition of Houston Sports Weekly, our weekly podcast on KPRC Channel 2, also KPRC 2 Plus, and click2houston.com. We drop each and every Friday. It lives for a while. You're either listening or you're watching. We appreciate that. Approaching just over a year, actually, of doing these things. So we appreciate all the support, and we are here for another half hour on this edition on this Friday. Randy McAvoy, Chancellor Johnson hanging out with you. And it's going to be a fun 30 minutes. If you like Rockets basketball and kind of what's going on with this offseason, there's a lot going on for the Rockets because of the draft. Free agency, Chancellor, begins today, later today, actually. If you're listening this on Friday, I believe it's 5 o'clock, right? 5 o'clock is when it all starts, and they've got like $60 million they could spend here.
A really big and busy offseason for the Houston Rockets. We've heard all offseason, even starting to end the season, coming from owner Tim Fertitta about transitioning from phase one, this kind of this rebuilding era, to getting to a little bit more of a playoff contending team, I should say. And so we saw how they were able to start their offseason off by drafting two of the top talents in the draft, which we'll touch on in a minute. And then now it is free agency time later on today. They have $60 million, the most cap space in the league. What will they do with it? We will see.
A lot of pressure on Rafael Stone to get this right because he's got a lot of money to spend, and he can't swing and miss on these moves. He needs to land some talent for sure. So here's what we're doing over the next 30 minutes, a little less than 30 minutes. Coming up in segment 2, we'll kind of focus more on the free agency situation. We'll throw out some names that are being mentioned right now, tied to the Rockets, at least as far as having interest. And then you had a chance to speak a little bit with the Athletics' Kelly Iko, too, right?
Absolutely. Kelly gave us some excellent insight about what the Rockets might do, as far as how much money might be thrown around, some potential trades, all that good stuff we will share with you in segment 2.
All right, so for this first segment, though, we're going to stay locked in on the rookies from the draft. And here in a few minutes, we're going to play some of the news conference video that went down on Monday at Toyota Center. They brought in the new guys, Amen Thompson and Cam Whitmore. They were surrounded by GM Rafael Stone and new coach Ime Udoka. So we'll play some of that sound here in just a few minutes. But let's first talk about these guys. And the Rockets had the number 4, number 20 pick. Going into the draft, we were like, okay, 4, they'll probably hold on, but what about 20? They'll probably unload that pick, right? Well, when you had Cam Whitmore slipping, they weren't going to get rid of that. They liked this guy a lot. And in fact, I think Rafael didn't even mention they tried to move up, just didn't work out. So anyway, they used their picks. They have 2 young guys with a lot of talent and a lot of upside.
Yeah, absolutely. Cam Whitmore was a guy that many had reported that he could be there as an option at number 4 for the Houston Rockets. Of course, we know that Houston ultimately decided to end up on Amen Thompson at number 4, and we'll talk about him in a moment. But for Cam Whitmore to slide all the way to 20, there were reports that, and actually Rafael said that they tried to trade up to 10, as high as 10, because they liked him that much.
Well, he was kind of everybody's mock. He was a top 10 guy.
He's definitely a top 10 guy and a top 5 talent. Look at his body, 6'7", really stocky guy, has a jumper, can get to the rack. He has some things that they want to see him improve on, but the talent is definitely there. The big thing and why people are like, oh, well, why did he slide so far to 20 is there was some concern about his medicals. But if you ask me, I don't understand why. He broke his leg when he was a freshman in high school, but that happens, right?
And so it was his leg, and then there was a thumb situation too. But he had that taken care of, right?
Taken care of. Yeah. It's basketball. Guys get hurt all the time, and you're talking about a guy who's 18 years old. It's not like he's 30 and we don't know if he can bounce back. So
he'll quickly, probably.
Yeah, for sure. So he's all ready to go. He looked healthy out in the Big East, helping Villanova, have the success that they continue to always have. That being one of the top programs in the country. But yes, Cam falling to 20 and them not having to give up any assets. I'm sure Rafael Stone was smiling from ear to ear.
Let's get into Amen Thompson real fast. Now, this is a kid he's 21, coming from Overtime Elite. So if you're a Joe Blow fan out there, they know the name, but if they follow the draft, you heard it a lot. Like, now, what's Overtime Elite? Right. Let's get an explanation. Tell me what you know about him. I'll freely admit I've never watched. I'd definitely heard of Overtime Elite, but have not pulled up. I'm going to watch a game tonight. Hadn't done that. So what level of talent are we talking about here?
To be fair to you, I don't think anybody's really tuned in and say, you know what, I'm going to watch some Overtime Elite this afternoon.
It's that stream game tonight.
Absolutely. But yeah, there was some question marks about the type of talent that he was going against and competition that he was playing against. OTE is mainly for developing younger guys. We're talking about guys still as young as high school, right? And so you have guys at the top of the draft like Brandon Miller who excelled in the NCAA at the collegiate level, in the SEC against some grown men. We saw it in the NCAA tournament. We saw Scoot Henderson, another big name at the top of the draft, play for the G League Ignite. We're talking about professionals. Victor Wembanyama over in France played against in the professional leagues in France.
Right.
But Amin Thompson's playing against some really young guys. We're talking about 18-year-olds. But I love the quote from Troy Weaver that Rafael Stone actually mentioned at the press conference, where Troy Weaver said, Halle Berry looks good in a grocery store or at a bar. Basically, it's insinuating that, you know how to spot talent when you see that, and we see that with the Thompson twins, because Detroit got Asar Thompson, his twin brother there. But
by the way, that was cool that he was at they're in each other's news conferences.
They do everything together,
yeah.
and that didn't change. They got drafted basically together. Actually, made history. The first brothers to go back-to-back top 5 in the draft ever.
Impressive.
So, and they're impressive young men as well. Extremely intelligent.
Mom and dad
mature.
were there
Absolutely.
at the news conference, and you can tell they were raised well.
Yeah, and so not only are they talented, but they have the markings of a leader in a locker room as well.
Yeah, I definitely like the way they carry themselves. All right, before we get to the sound, we'll get that in a couple of minutes. Cam Whitmore, let's go back to him now. 18 years old, but has a game already. And, I mean, again, big time up, just like Thompson. Big time upside is that his game's going to continue to develop.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, as I mentioned earlier, he has the size, he has the shot. His kind of the pros versus cons for him, the con wise would be sometimes he can get tunnel vision and not a great playmaker that you like to see from a guy that's a wing. But once again, he's 18 years old, so a lot of people had him mocked. We say top 10, that's just to be on the safe side. I saw him as high as 3, right? And so, obviously, the Rockets, they loved him for a reason. As soon as he fell out of the top 10, Rafael felt like he had the assets to go up and get him. Nobody bid on it, and he just continued to slide. And look, what do you know? He falls right into their lap.
And he's actually been in Houston. We had a spotlight story. Ari had gone out and caught up with him, and we aired on Sports Sunday a couple of weeks ago.
Watch every Sunday, by the way.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, plug right there, 10:30. He'd been working out here for several weeks. So, I mean, how cool was that? That you're already here. You're kind of getting acclimated to the city. You're not coming in not knowing anything about H-Town, but he does already. But and then the Rockets end up taking him.
It's funny because Cam Whitmore has that connection to Houston by him training over the offseason and landed in Houston. And then the Thompson, Amin Thompson, has a connection because his brother, his oldest brother, there's 3 of them. The oldest brother played at Prairie View A&M University. I got to make sure I get that right. But so he was talking about how he learned about the city of Houston through his brother as well. So both have connections to Houston, and now we hope that they are stay tied to Houston with a lot of success down the road.
Yeah. And one last note, we'll get to the sound here. Whitmore's family was there, and again, the kid's 18. Dad, they're in Maryland. I had a chance. I don't know if you met him while you're out there. I got a chance to meet his dad, and chance he could be down here quite a bit, which is probably smart. When you got a kid who's still 18, you might need the parents kind of help you get off the ground a little bit as you begin your NBA career. So.
Yeah, got a chance to talk to Myron Whitmore, Papa Whitmore, as some people call him. But yeah, I mean, the Rockets are getting a great kid in him, and I was talking to his father, and he was saying all the concerns about his medical and the other thing that people were talking about maybe slid him down in the draft was his personality, that he's not just this big extrovert, but they say if you get to know him, you'll see some of that personality comes out. But at the end of the day, he just wants to play basketball, and he plays basketball at a really high level, especially at only 18 years old.
Real quick, before we get to the sound, we were talking yesterday. Out of these two, we actually mentioned on Sunday too, out of Thompson and out of Whitmore, whose game develops the quickest?
I think
in the NBA.
I think it really depends on what they do in free agency because if they bring in, they're already kind of log jammed with guys who can play. They really don't have a clear cut rotation, right? Like that's the reason why they've only won 40 games over 2 years. But I think Amin, I like his upside as far as his playmaking ability and defensively. And if he gets that jumper, we're talking about a guy who could be a top 10 player in the league one day.
Wow.
With Cam Whitmore, the sky's the limit on him as well. Consistency is kind of his thing, but they all need playing time. And once again, we talked about this earlier. If they sign Fred VanVleet, Amen Thompson might take some away of his minutes. They sign a guy like Dylan Brooks, could eat into Cam Whitmore's minutes. But I think they have a right plan in place with Udoka, Ben Sullivan, some of the assistant coaches to help them develop.
Ease them in and don't rush them for sure. All right, the news conference took place on Monday at Toyota Center. You had Thompson there, of course. You had Whitmore on stage with those two guys, were head coach Ime Udoka and also GM Rafael Stone. We're going to play some of that sound right now. You can listen in to some of the high points from that news conference. Again, this past Monday at Toyota Center, their introductory news conference as they officially become Houston Rockets. So let's roll some of that and listen in right now.
First off, I'm excited to be a Rocket. Thankful for the Fertitta family and Rafael for giving me a chance, believing in me to be a Rocket, and I'm excited to be here.
Just want to give a shout out to Fertitta, Rafael, and Ime for taking a chance on me. I mean, I didn't think the situation would end up, but I'm happy to be a Rocket. Happy to be back in Houston. I'm just very grateful and very blessed and very excited to get started too. Very.
Obviously, the players and their families are very excited, but Rafael and myself, as well as Tillman and Patrick, are probably more excited. Got a chance to see these guys, obviously, during their seasons, but in individual workouts quite a bit, and love the players. So a big day for us to get these two young players with us, and excited to get going.
What do you think you can bring right away?
I think I could just bring leadership, defense, just, the things, intangibles I could bring to the team right away. Just being a good locker room guy, all that stuff.
I'm sure you've heard from a lot of people since you got drafted and got a lot of nice messages. I was wondering, is there anything that stood out, like anybody that you heard from where you were like, wow, I got a message from this person, or is there anything you could share with me?
I would say, just the Rockets players showing love through social media. That was just, stood out. So, I was, I'm going to, be on the team now. So, that was, very exciting that. But, I would say, Rudy Gay, just a long time, mentor. I'm from that area, Baltimore. So, just recent NBA player that's, in the league right now. That just stood out to me.
I would say probably, players reaching out to me, like Josh Christopher, Tari Eason, they reached out, and I appreciated that.
Coach, what are the specific things you'd like the guys to work on just to get ready for the season?
Well, they bring a ton of things to the table already. Obviously, with our team, the thing I've stressed to them is a defensive mentality, which they both naturally have. Shooting is always at a premium, and so that's the thing I've been stressing to them to build and work on. But also in Summer League, that'll be something that we'll definitely stress. So just becoming all-around players, using their athleticism to their advantage and adding the shooting piece.
I'm curious, are you someone who closely followed the NBA growing up? Do you fire up League Pass nowadays? And if so, are there any recent players, modern players you pattern your game after?
Yeah, I always grew up watching basketball. I had League Pass every year. It's a little overpriced, but I really like to watch SGA and just athletic guards like that.
For Cam, you mentioned after draft night that you feel like you've been overlooked at various points in your life. So I'm wondering, how did you find the conviction to know that, this was the path that you wanted to be on?
The path was just, pretty much the same path I've been taking for I don't know how long. So, it was just, nothing new. It's just, have the same goal, keep the same goal, the main thing. And just take away the distractions, just, keep focused, keep your head down, just keep working. The distractions are going to come with it, the rumors are going to come with it. So, just, stay away from that, you'll be straight.
This is for Coach Udoka. Y'all made it clear that you were surprised Cam was still there. When you left the war room with Patrick and Rafael, what was that feeling of, like, we really came away from this draft with some solid pieces?
That was a great feeling. Obviously, these are two guys that we targeted, with the early picks. And for us to get the two guys of this caliber, obviously, is a huge night for us. Wasn't expected at all, but obviously a pleasant surprise on our part. For Cam and these guys, we all talked immediately after the draft, using these as motivation, these things that happen. But at the end of the day, once you get drafted, everybody's in the same boat. Whether you're a first pick, a second-round pick, you're all in the same place, and you have to carve out a career. And so we're happy with the guys we got, obviously. Looked at possibly moving up, and when he kept falling to us, it was a surprise to us. And so we're extremely happy with the guys we got and looking forward to coaching them.
All right, some of the high points from the news conference on Monday at Toyota Center, and we mentioned earlier, man, the way they carried themselves, very impressive for these two young men. The fans are going to love these kids.
My favorite part from that press conference, what you guys just saw, was when they were asked to describe each other's game, and Amin Thompson said, "Hey, Cam Whitmore was at the top of my board," so I know they're really excited to play with each other. But as you can see, like I said, both the Thompson twins, Asar and Amin, both really intelligent. 21 years old, they're still really young, but they're really mature. And I think that they're coming to, as of right now, a really young locker room. But I could see specifically Amin kind of coming over and becoming a leader somewhere soon down the road.
Yeah.
And he's a winning player. If you watched, which I know most of you guys didn't, any of OTE, he didn't necessarily lead the team in any specific categories, but they just helped the team win a lot of games. Both the Thompson twins together, Cam Whitmore, he had a couple of funny one-liners as well too. But I'm really excited to see them kick things off when summer league starts next week.
Yeah, it's going to be next. See, if you're listening to this on Friday, next Friday.
Yeah.
It all starts out in Vegas, right? And so they'll be holding some kind of mini camp with whatever that summer league roster is. And right now, both Thompson and Whitmore slated to suit up and get to work.
Absolutely. And then one game to watch for the summer league, we'll get to see the Thompson brothers face off against each other. We know during the summer league, the NBA loves the little drama.
Yeah.
So we'll see Scoot Henderson and Victor Wembanyama.
Is Victor playing?
Oh,
okay.
Early.
Okay.
A lot of times they play maybe 1 or 2 games and they sit them out. But
there'll be a lot of attention on that.
Absolutely.
No doubt.
It'll be fun.
All right. So that is segment 1 in the books, talking Rockets post-draft, hearing from the rookies as well, along with Coach Udoka and Rafael Stone. So we're going to take a break here on Houston Sports Weekly. When we come back, we're going to segue into free agency because that starts later today at 5 o'clock. That's when free agency begins across the league. We'll talk about some names being mentioned, and also we'll hear from the Athletics' Kelly Eco when Houston Sports Weekly continues. We'll be right back. And welcome back to Houston Sports Weekly, everybody, our weekly sports podcast here on KPRC 2 Plus, and click2houston.com. Our Rockets theme this week on this edition, I've lost track on how many numbers we are into this podcast, but it's over a year now. We're having fun with it, and I hope you're enjoying it as well, either watching or listening. Randy McAvoy, Chancellor Johnson with you. We talked about the rookies just a few minutes ago. We heard from the rookies as well, Amon Thompson and Cam Whitmore. And as they kind of now begin their transition to life in the NBA Summer League next week. But let's talk now, before we get to the Kelly Eco part of that interview from The Athletic, on the free agent situation out for the Rockets. No secret, Chancellor, they got money to spend, like around that $60 million mark. There's a lot of pressure, I think, falling right on the shoulders of Rafael Stone as the general manager to get this right.
Not just a lot of money, they have the most money as of right now in the NBA going into free agency is around $60 million in cap space. Rafael has the opportunity to be really creative about how he wants to go about it. He doesn't have to give it all to one player because I don't think there's not a Giannis and Luka, those guys, Joel Embiid, there's not just a clear-cut guy we got to pay all this money to all in one time. So you can kind of split it up. And there's still some all-star level players out there, whether it's a Fred VanVleet, who's made an all-star team before. Of course, James Harden. He's been linked to Houston ever since he left Houston, right? Maybe he could come back, maybe not. Brook Lopez is another name. Dylan Brooks.
That's kind of a bad word around here.
Most, not just with Rockets fans, but most
just
fans
in general.
Just
in general.
It's just like with him, it's the antics. It doesn't match the level of play. You even go back to the Lakers series. If you remember that, he called LeBron James old and I don't respect LeBron. And then they end up losing in 5 games. And so, and if you remember that, the Grizzlies, the team that he's played with his entire career, said under no circumstances will Dylan Brooks be back. And that says a lot. I'm getting off on a Dylan Brooks tangent, but this just goes to show you how much I don't want that guy on my team. But and I think many other Rockets fans feel that same way. But Dylan Brooks is potentially an option for Houston. But the guy can play defense. There is some upside to him.
Which fits right into what Udoka
right, and that's why it makes sense to bring a guy like Dylan Brooks. But there's also some other tier guys. Austin Reeves, his name has been thrown out there. Cam Johnson, they could use his shooting. Plus, he's a Johnson. It's just what we do.
And there you go. That's how you put it.
But they definitely have some names up
Reeves
there.
and Johnson both restricted, so they're out there right now. But you got to look at the teams they're currently with the Nets and the Lakers. Good chance they want these. They don't want to lose these guys.
Absolutely,
they can get another deal in place.
Absolutely, but of course everybody has a price, right?
Right,
And so
absolutely.
maybe they don't value Cam Johnson that high as maybe the Rockets potentially can pay him. And if you're Brooklyn, you also have to remember Cam Johnson came over in that trade with for Kevin Durant, and so if you lose Cam Johnson and don't pay him after you gave up Kevin Durant, you basically had him for 20 games and now he's with somebody else. So there's also some more incentive there as well. So Houston has some options. Do they maybe spend it just on two players? Do they kind of spread it out? Ime Udoka and Rafael Stone can continue to really build this team.
Well, we'll get to the interview with Kelly Iko in just a moment. Brooks Lopez wrote just a quick hit on him with the Bucks, used to winning at a high level, been around 15 years. It's going to be a lot of money to spend on him. Bucks may want to try to keep him too, but here's a guy that's been around the league a while, and you and I were talking before we taped this. Very high level defensive player.
Yeah, absolutely. Ime Udoka and Rafael Stone have talked about this team needs some veterans, and Brook Lopez is the ultimate veteran. He has the experience of not just a playoff team, but a championship team. So he knows what it takes. He can help develop a lot of this young roster on his team. But he's a big man that can stretch the floor and he can defend. He made the all defensive team this year. So a little bit older than some of your other guys, but he still can bring a lot to this team.
All right, let's get to the interview now. You spoke with Kelly Iko.
NBA free agency begins this Friday, and the Houston Rockets have the most cap space in the entire league. But a man who doesn't cap, Kelly Iko of The Athletic, joins me now. And Kelly, it seems like all season long it was Harden to Houston. That is, until recently. What's changed?
So at the beginning of this process, when the Rockets identified James as their top target, it was because, point guard is the biggest position of need, and he was considered the best point guard on the market. Obviously, the personal factors, being in Houston for a long time, having family, community set up, it made a lot of sense. But in recent weeks, things have gone on behind the scenes to kind of distance Harden from that reunion tour.
Give me some tea.
So, for starters, from a basketball perspective, the Bradley Beal thing, it changed a lot of the landscape because Harden was at one point considering Phoenix as an option because Arizona State, he has a home in the area, familiar, Kevin Durant, Devin Booker. But that trade kind of changed things. So you're looking at the NBA landscape, the West is going to be a bloodbath. And staying in the East has its perks. You have Joel Embiid. You were up 3-2 against the Boston Celtics, to go to the conference finals. There are things to do that if you can move Tobias Harris, get some more pieces, now you might be cooking with gas. On the other hand, the flip side, remember Jalen Green's podcast? He talked with Paul George. He wasn't too keen on, some of his comments of kind of almost not disparaging James, but he didn't sound too on board with the whole idea of him returning. That was another factor. Also, the Sixers are trying to get John Lucas to come over there, too. And there is a job for him in Houston, too. But you understand why Daryl Morey and James kind of want John Lucas, a familiar face, to come over to Philadelphia. So in recent weeks, you kind of seen the money on the table also as well. The Rockets aren't kind of trying to give him near max money. And Philadelphia might be in a better spot to give him a 3-year deal, kind of near maxed.
Even if Harden doesn't come to Houston, there's still other big names out there in the free agency market, including another former All-Star guard coming out of the East, Fred VanVleet. He's been linked to the Rockets. Why could that be a potential marriage this offseason?
So when you look at what Ime Udoka wants to do in terms of bringing in guys that have been to the championship, won the championship, can instill a level of culture and confidence in those young guys, especially at the point guard position, you understand why Fred VanVleet is their number 2 target in terms of point guards.
Even with the Amen Thompson coming in.
For sure. And he can also be a bridge to Amen Thompson. If it's coming on a short-term deal, let Amen grow under VanVleet, allow Fred to still success, and then in 2 years' time, 2-3 years' time, hand over the keys to Amen.
Ime Udoka's talked a lot about bringing in some veterans and defensive-minded guys. One name that's also been tied and potentially maybe some high max money in Brook Lopez out of the Milwaukee Bucks, a championship guy, can shoot it, can space the floor, and play defense. What's the chances of that happening with the Houston Rockets?
So people like Brook Lopez, because he's coming from a situation in Milwaukee where he's won a championship, they still have a pretty competitive roster. You have to compete and see, is it going to be more worth it to stay in Milwaukee and try and win a championship, or come to Houston, be a mentor, be a stabilizing presence, get some more money because of no state income tax? He's going to have to put that to perspective. But the Rockets are pretty confident in being aggressive right at the beginning, they're going to call Brook Lopez, they're going to call Dylan Brooks, they're going to call Fred VanVleet, put the money on the table, short-term deal, maybe a little bit more money than some of his competitors, and try and see if he can bring them in.
All right, good conversation there with the Athletics. Kelly Eco in the know, really locked in across the NBA, certainly with the Rockets. It's going to be interesting, that Harden situation. There's a lot of talk when he left, Chancellor, that he had a under-the-table deal with Tillman, like, just let me go play here, these places, let me get some money. I'll come back.
Yeah.
And whether that's true or not, we'll find out. But I would think he's going to stay in Philadelphia.
At this point, it looks like all signs point to him returning to Philadelphia. The question is on how much money. Of course, Rockets fans wanted to see Harden back in Houston. He still comes here every single year, still has JH Town weekend where he gives back to the community. He, as Kelly mentioned in our recent conversation, that he was working out with guys like Jalen Green and Kevin Porter Jr., really taking them underneath his wing. But as of right now, he might go back to Philly, and so they'll have other options. Fred VanVleet, as I mentioned earlier, as Kelly's mentioned, a guy who if he comes over, came from a championship team when the Raptors won their first ever franchise title.
Right.
Can shoot the ball, can defend. He's a little undersized, but he does a lot of things really, really well. I would like to see Fred VanVleet in a Rockets uniform. I think he's a really good vet. As I mentioned, a fringe-level all-star type player. I think he could help this team.
All right, free agency starts at 5 o'clock today. If you're listening on Friday, we will see what happens as the madness begins across the NBA. It's been a good show talking Rockets basketball, hearing from the rookies and the impact they could have as well, and, of course, what direction they may go in free agency. As always, we appreciate you watching and listening. For Chancellor Johnson, I'm Randy McElvoy. So long for now. We will talk to you again next week right here on Houston Sports Weekly.